So Hare Krishna, this is the third section of the Isopanishad, and we're going to cover mantras 8 through 11. 8, 9, 10, 11. There will be two more sections. It's a total of 5 sections to cover the whole book, and those will happen the next 2 weeks. So we'll start with mantra 8. There's a whole listing here in this verse of this mantra of various characteristics and qualities of the Lord. Some of which we've kind of understood already, but there's some new things as well. So in this mantra, we're going to get a few things. We're going to get a further confirmation of the Lord's personal form. Last week we talked a lot about that, how the Lord walked and couldn't walk, these sorts of things. Even at the beginning, Prabhupada says to be complete meant to have a form. So here we're going to also get a little bit more confirmation of that. We're going to get a little bit more explanation and confirmation of the Lord's unique power and position. We discussed that extensively last time about, and also in the beginning, just the fact that you have this entity who is complete, even from the invocation, produces so many completes and remains complete. That's unique, and we discussed all the other implications so many last time. But we're going to go a little bit further into that. And then, probably most importantly here, an understanding of the Lord's benevolence and other wonderful personal qualities. We get to understand something about him personally in some of the qualities here. And that in particular, along with all the other ones that we understand already, should help us to increase our faith and make us feel comfortable to surrender to him. Because sometimes we feel that if somebody is the ultimate powerful, autocrat, Prabhupada says he's the, in Bhaktivinoda Saraswati says the transcendental autocrat, that may make us nervous. What kind of a guy is he? Right? We say, so in that sense, it's nice to know that he's a nice guy. And so we're going to hear those qualities that will help us to deal with, to help us to deepen our faith in that regard and remove any doubts that we might have. So here's the mantra. We have it up on the screen. Saparyagatchukramakayam avranam asnaviram shudamapapavidam kavir manishi paribus payambur yatha tatyat tortan vyadajat chashvatibhya samabhyaha. And the translation is such a person, and we're carrying over from the last 2 verses where we understood how everything is contained in the Lord, how in every living entity the Lord is existing and there's a soul. Which we understood something special about that. It was a katvam. It has a certain oneness with the Lord in there. So that person who has that understanding, she says, such a person must factually know the greatest of all, the personality of Godhead, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without veins, pure and uncontaminated, the self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling everyone's desire since time immemorial. So we have a little list here in the next slide just of all those different qualities. We'll cover them in order. And so there's akayam, unembodied, asnaviram, without veins, shukram, omnipotent. I've grouped them together because they kind of relate to certain aspects together. Kavi, omniscient, manishi, philosopher. Both Kavi and manishi, Prabhupada translates some other places, greatly learned, individuals and things like that. They're fairly synonymous. Paribu, the greatest of all. Swayambhu, self-sufficient. Shuddham, in the word for word, Prabhupada calls it antiseptic, and in the smooth translation, he says pure. And apapavidham, he has prophylactic in the word for word. The books are back here. If anybody needs books or a clipboard, we have there. There's apapavidam. In the word for word, it's prophylactic. And in the smooth translations, it's uncontaminated. And kind of literally, it means untouched by sin, without sin, not touched by it. Avranam, without reproach, he says in the word for word, and beyond reproach in the smooth translation. And then the whole combination of words, yata tatya tortan vedadach, fulfills everyone's desires. So we'll take a look at these qualities kind of one by one and notice some of their implications. Um, the first one's akayam, unembodied. And here in the purport of this mantra, Prabhupada says, he has his own transcendental form, which is not at all similar to the forms of the mundane world. The forms of the living entities in this world are embodied in material nature, and they work like any material machine. It is clearly stated here that he is unembodied, which means that there is no difference between his body and his soul. And then here in the next slide, I quoted, and Prabhupada is talking about this, a verse from the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, text 61, where it says, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energies. It says in here, this yantra rudhani. They're like our bodies are like machines. So this is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, that we're souls and we're inside this machine, material energy. And so the Lord's body is not like that. And we'll discuss that a little bit. And then and that kind of combines with this asnaviram, without veins. Okay. And Prabhupada says in the purport to this mantra, he says, the anatomy of a material body must have a mechanical construction with veins and so forth. But the transcendental body of the Supreme Lord has nothing like veins. So here in the next slide, I'll take a look at those two things together. Prabhupada says he translates akayam as unembodied rather than without a body. Akayam means body, and even like in English, you put as a prefix, it means not. So you can say not, not a body. But Prabhupada, he calls it unembodied. And you'll notice that if Krishna had no body at all, it would be redundant to say he's without veins. He doesn't have any part of the body then. Right? He doesn't have to worry about veins or anything else. And so the implication is, as Prabhupada says, the combination of Akayam and Asnaviram clearly points to Krishna having an extraordinary sort of body. So he has that's why he's so in this case, as the prophet says, his body is not different from himself. So we are a soul inside a body, and he's a spiritual entity without a duality like that. He's a whole entity. It's not something inside a body there, no mechanism. We actually, because we're ekatvam, just as an aside here, we are in the same way in our natural state. That's in the spiritual reality. Without veins. Yeah. Okay. So next we have Shukram, the omnipotent. Okay. And we understand this, I think, pretty well by now, how that would be the case. Everything in existence is the energy of the Lord and fully under his control. This is what we discussed so much last week, or the last session, when we talked about how everything that exists is the Lord's energy and expansion. He's conscious of everything, and just as we are in control of our bodies, he's conscious of everything there and can manipulate them according to his desire. His creation is very flexible. We were mentioning comparing it even to like a virtual reality type of situation where, like I say, he were a supercomputer inside the supercomputer creating the virtual reality and acting out as a person inside that situation while in the background manipulating everything. Everything is he can change everything. Nothing is hard. It's not difficult. He doesn't have to. He can create reality just as he likes. And so that's about as omnipotent as it gets. You know, I don't think you can even conceive. I wasn't that when I thought about omnipotent, I couldn't conceive of something quite that extreme. So I don't think it's possible to go beyond that. That's as omnipotent as you can get. And in the same way, it says he's these two things, omniscient and is a philosopher. And we quoted last time from Srimad Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada says this other places too, that he is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. So he is aware of everything as if it were like an extended body. We understand that he has his own form, which is complete and therefore different from everything else. But his expansions remain connected to him in a way that our kind of creations cannot. If I build something, it's outside of me. I can't feel it. I can't control it. For him, it's like it's an expansion of his own self, and he still has, it still is integrated with him in some way. He still is conscious of it. He still can control it and change it. It is only what he wants it to be. If I make something, if I build a house in a certain way, and later on I don't like the design, it's tough for me. I have to make changes. It may be very costly, very difficult. For Krishna, he makes it, and if he wants to make it different, it becomes different without any effort. No problem. So the notion of creation with him is a lot different from what we experience.
Is the word indirect that mean through his plenary form?
Yeah, I think you could say super soul. Sometimes he also is told by devatas or other people come and tell him different information. You know, Lord Brahma comes to him. Prays at the ocean of milk, and but also in his form as Krishna, he can be aware of everything. That's direct.
And why this choice of antiseptic as a translation of Shivam?
Well, we're gonna get to that. That's on the way.
Okay.
Oh, we're gonna discuss all the qualities in order. And Prabhupada explains it actually in the purport. We'll talk about there's the antiseptic and the prophylactic. He shows have dual applications. One of them refers specifically to Krishna himself, and the other meaning means his effect on others. So we'll see. We'll discuss that though. Okay, then Paribhu, the greatest of all. So I've grouped these together: the omniscient, omnipotent, and Paribhu, because they all kind of go back to that notion of him as being everything, the source of everything, and then there being nothing which is outside of that. And so I say greatest is a comparative. Actually, there's only Krishna, so technically, there is nothing to which to compare him. He is by default the greatest. There isn't even anything else. It's only him and his creations. But I said, even if we differentiate him from his energies, we know that he remains complete, so can expand his energies without limit. Therefore, none of his energies, or even all of his energies, could equal him. Like we understand, we showed even the whole map of existence before, where he's manifested so many of these things. He could do it 2 or 3, 4, 200, 2 million more times, and still be complete and do it. So even if he does it, this is this kind of mathematics of infinity. Even if he expands the same thing, an infinite number of times, he still has the potential to do it many infinite numbers of times. So even if you take all of his energies together that he's expanded, they can't come close to him because he can do it all. They can do that again and double it anytime you want. So therefore, greatest is easy. Really, there's no comparison there at all. So Paribu, we understand that well from what we've heard before. Should be no dispute on that. Then Swayambhu, again, this also fits in with the same notion. He is complete in the source of everything. And I said, it just doesn't get more self-sufficient than that. He doesn't. There's nothing else to depend upon. And he's complete. He has everything already, and he has the potential to make anything he likes. And it's only him there. So, I don't know. Is there, what can be more self-sufficient? So that seems also pretty clear from our understanding of the Lord that we've received so far.
What complete means actually, like when we use that word.
Uh-huh. Means he has everything. So like when we mentioned pranam as in the beginning of the invocation is the word pranam, right? So usually also in the beginning, so when we say we're not self-sufficient, first of all we mean that we lack something, and that we get that from somewhere else, isn't it? Aren't those two things are implications when we're not self-sufficient? That there's something that we lack, and we get it from the outside. So those two things are implied by there. So Krishna on both counts, uh, that doesn't apply. Right? He already has everything. He's complete, so he doesn't need anything. And were he to get anything, it comes from his own energies. It doesn't come from the outside.
There is nothing you can take from
Yeah, yeah. So he doesn't even need anything. But even if he wanted something more, it comes from himself. So I think on both counts, self-sufficient is another slam dunk here. Very easy from what we already understand about him. Mhm. And that will also uh, it comes in conjunction with he's self-sufficient, and later on at the end we'll talk about how he supplies everything for everybody else. He's not dependent upon anyone. Everyone else is dependent upon him. Those two kind of do come into conjunction. Now here we have Shuddham, okay, and and so I see here pure and purifying. Prabhupada explains in the purport that he says antiseptic he explains antiseptic means when something when an antiseptic comes into contact with something impure, it purifies it. So that's why he uses kind of that term there. He's pure himself already. That's that translation he gives in the smooth translation, and he's antiseptic because anything he comes in contact with, including us, becomes purified by his contact through contact with him. Um, Now I'm going to take a little bit of look here at what it means to be pure, because that's not necessarily self-explanatory. And I thought we'd take a look here at what we usually consider to be the sources of contamination, impurity.
small question.
Hmm.
Like he is pure, and anything he comes in contact, that becomes pure.
Yes.
So, like, my question is kind of theoretical. Like, something came in contact with Krishna, that became pure, and something else is in contact with that, that again becomes pure. So, like that, everything should be pure, right?
Well, we understand. We have to always remember that we as spirit souls are a katvam, and one of the things that Krishna has given us is a certain independence. Right? So we're Krishna. We're part of Krishna. We're an energy of Krishna. The material world is a part of Krishna. But we wished to be independent of Krishna. Okay? So we're going to discuss here what it means to be impure. And so therefore Krishna, we'll also hear later on how Krishna gives us our desires. He gives us desires as we like. So we're allowed to have a region of impurity by Krishna's will.
That's right. But when we are pure, sufficiently pure, that very impure thought that, like, I want to act independent of Krishna should not come, right? Because he is already pure and we are already in contact with him, and
Well, that we're going to talk about. How strongly is the contact? You see, we're going to talk about that later. You see. So yeah, why aren't we purified instantaneously? Is what you're saying then by thinking of Krishna? Yeah.
when we first come here,
Well,
like,
but when we, but that's instantaneous. But we're going to talk about that later too. That we don't have one-pointed desires. You see, we may want to become purified and not worship Krishna, but does it mean the other desires are gone? We'll discuss that. Okay, that should become clear later. So anyway, so what we usually mean by impure is explained in Bhagavad Gita 337. There's all these impure qualities. Sometimes there's six of them, sometimes there's more of them. Prabhupada usually sticks with three, really, for most of the time he talks. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust, Arjuna, kama, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And then Prabhupada says in the 1622 Bhagavad Gita, he says, one should be very careful of these three enemies to human life, lust, anger, and greed. The more a person is freed from lust, anger, and greed, the more his existence becomes pure. Okay, so it's connected. This is what we usually talk about being impure, is that we have these faults. Sometimes it's what is it? Lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. Sometimes he puts it out to those. He adds kama, krodha, lobha, and then what is it? Moha, mada, and matsarya. They all follow from one another. The root of it is this kama, this desire. That's the root of them all. Okay. Prabhupada says the more that we become free of those, we become pure. Okay. So this is a real key to what purity is. So now let's take a look at Krishna. What we've just learned about him, right? That he's self-sufficient. I added and complete, although it's kind of redundant because self-sufficiently includes that. There is no question of him having lust, anger, and greed. Because the anger comes when we want something that we can't get. Then we become angry generally. That's what it is. Or maybe it's respect, or just maybe we want something we can't get it and we become anger out of frustration. Right? And greed also because the root is in that lacking, that kama, that desire. I feel incomplete. I need something. And I never seem to have enough, so I want more and more and more, so I never feel any lacking. We talked about that atyahara in the Nectar of Instruction. So it all comes from this internal feeling of kama. Prabhupada says our love of God gets turned into desire, personal desire. Our desire to serve gets transformed into kama. That's what happens originally. And so this is the root of all of our contaminations. Right? It's this kama, and all the other things that follow are kind of corollaries of that, really. But Krishna,
So, Prabhu, the lust over there, is that physical lust? Or?
it can't. That's one of the most powerful forms, but it just means desire. In general, it's desire.
Okay.
We have all kinds of desires, material desires. So the Prabhupada says, kind of the the most archetypical example is physical lust, the desire for sex. That's the most, if you distilled it all down to the most pure form, it would be like that. But it means all other types of desire too. It just means the general term for kama is just desire. So it can be that or not. All of our many types of desires.
Mean desire to acquire.
Hmm?
Mean desire to acquire.
Yeah, just we want something. We feel lacking, and we want to get something that's going to help us. Here I sit right now, and I'm not happy, and I think that something that I could attain
So that
could make me happy. And when I can't attain it, it makes me upset, right? And when I keep getting stuff and it doesn't fulfill me for a long time, then I think, well, maybe I need more, and more, because then I won't run out, because this works for a while, that works for a while, so let me have a lot of stuff, so I don't run out, right? And that also and that when that desire is strong, it'll cause me to do things I otherwise wouldn't do. And everybody has this experience where you thought, why did I do that? Afterwards, that wasn't very smart at all. I'm smarter than that. Why did I do that? Right? Because the illusion came in, and we became mad. Right? And then when we see other people who seem to have more stuff than us, we become envious of them. Or if they seem to be in our way, envy means we don't want their welfare. Why do they have to have it, or what are they to stand in my way? All these things, they all root back into this, feeling of incompleteness, of neediness, of need and desire. Okay? So Krishna, he doesn't have any of that. He's filled to the maximum. He doesn't need anything. His psychology is completely different than ours. We're used to a psychology of lack. That's how we've lived all of our lives, and in fact, all of our many lives. That's so deeply. But Krishna is a whole different kind of guy. That's why we can't easily extrapolate our thinking onto him. He's coming from a totally different place. Okay? We will find that the less we feel burning desires, the more generous we become, the more empathetic we become to others. Which is natural. So Krishna is that to the maximum. Okay. Um, then Prabhupada says, and then here's Anuradha, here's your answer. This is from the purport. He says, he is antiseptic in the sense that even an impure thing can become purified just by touching him, because in all circumstances he is Shuddham, most purified. He is often compared to the sun. The sun extracts moisture from many untouchable places on the earth, yet it remains pure. In fact, it purifies obnoxious things by virtue of its sterilizing powers. If the sun, which is a material object, is so powerful, then we can hardly begin to imagine the purifying strength of the all-powerful Lord. So it purifies us, also. Well, also, and we notice that in bhakti, we offer things to the Lord, which become prasadam. We have that. And then he says, and this is from the purport of that Bhagavad Gita, verse 1866. Prabhupada says, as soon as one seriously engages himself in devotional service to the Lord, in full Krishna consciousness, so this is part of the answer to your question, at once he becomes free from all contamination of material nature. There are different processes of religion and purificatory processes by cultivation of knowledge, meditation, in the mystic yoga system, etc. But one who surrenders unto Krishna does not have to execute so many methods. So I quoted that just to make sure that he's purifying in contact with us. If we have contact with Krishna, we can help to remove our contamination. So then that's how he's antiseptic. He's pure and antiseptic, pure and purifying. The two, Prabhupada gives us kind of dual meanings to that Shuddham. And then we have apapavidam. And the translation in the word for it is prophylactic, means protective. Prophylactic is a preventative, something that protects. Otherwise, he's uncontaminated and untouched by sin are the other ways to look at that. Prabhupada uses uncontaminated in the word, the smooth translation. And then in the purport to this mantra, Prabhupada says, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 9:30 and 31, a devotee may appear to be Sudaracha. We covered this in the Nectar of Instruction. Not well behaved in the beginning, but he should be accepted as pure because he is on the right path. This is due to the prophylactic nature of the Lord's association. So we know that by improper behavior, he says we enter into the darkness of ignorance. But here it says if we talked about how somebody who is worshiping Krishna exclusively and with quite a lot of dedication, even if there's some mistake because of their contaminations, they come back from that. They bounce back and they become purified in the future. So Krishna prevents them a little bit from the small infection spreading, I guess is what you could put it that way. So there's a certain protection there, even though they may actually do something poor. It also keeps us, his association keeps us from wanting to do wrong things. But even if we do, the full effect doesn't come about. You have a small infection instead of a big one. Take it like that. That's how Prabhupada mentions it. That's why he explains that in the purport. Also, and he also in the purport says the Lord is also apapavidam because sin cannot touch him, even if he acts in a way that appears to be sinful. This is interesting, right? Such actions are all good, for there is no question of his being affected by sin. So let's take a look at that here in the next slide. Sinful actions are impelled by the above-mentioned lust, anger, and greed. We mentioned that we will tend to, because of the desire, we may do things we know aren't the right thing. It overpowers our discrimination and good sense. And sinful actions are generally actions which harm others, and they do two things. They harm others generally. That's usually what counts as a sin. And cause the sinner to come more deeply under the influence of sinful desires. This we'll discuss later in the Nectar of Devotion, that when we commit a sin, we develop an inclination to do that more. We come under the sinful mentality. It's not just that's one of the reactions. So I said, as here I say, the Lord is complete and all others are manifestation of his energy. He has no needs and has only good wishes for his creations. So by nature, he's not going to harm anybody. That's one of the sinful things. He doesn't have the lust and things that would drive him to do something inappropriate. And then the example generally given here is that even if the Lord kills someone, By his purifying touch, the person killed is free from all sins and attains liberation. So with the Lord, his he has good wishes, which we're going to discover even further as we go along. He has no needs, right? So he doesn't commit sins. Right? There's the causation that causes us to do it just isn't there for him. And even when he does something that looks wrong from the outside, he actually does benefit to that individual. Everything he does is always good for everybody, is what it comes down to. And that stems from his, of course, ability to act as he chooses, and also his wonderful nature. Is that okay? Yeah. He's untouched by sin. And then here it says he's avranam, without or beyond reproach. That we kind of covered that with the notion of a papavidam. But here Prabhupada in the purport says, and this is kind of an elevated example, but Prabhupada gave it, so we're going to kind of go with it. He danced with the gopis without social restriction and without reproach. Although the gopis approached him with the paramour's feelings of love, the relationship between the gopis and Lord Krishna was worshipped even by Lord Chaitanya, who was a strict sannyasi and rigid follower of disciplinary regulations. So anyway, we have that, according to the normal morality, right? One doesn't associate with anyone besides one's wife in the Vedic society. And so here in the Rasalita dance, Krishna was apparently dealing with the wives of others and dancing. They were unmarried boys and he was a young boy and they were young girls. And Prabhupada here says that Lord Chaitanya was a very strict sannyasi and would never even associate with somebody who was improperly situated, never associate with the opposite sex. But he worshipped that particular thing. And Prabhupada explains in different places, he says that since everything is Krishna's energy, he tells this one person who is criticizing Krishna for being an adulterer. He says, also your wife belongs to Krishna. He's the Supreme Lord. So, and then the other sense is that what's happening in a situation like that is that this is simply an exchange of love between the Lord and his devotees. And even in the case of the husbands, there's a couple of different explanations given. In one place, Yogamaya tells Krishna and tells the gopis that the gopis that were staying with their husbands were expansions that she created. And that the gopis that were dancing with Krishna only thought that they were associating with their husbands at times. So says the actual gopis who danced with Krishna never had any contact with their so-called husbands. And then the other thing in Vrindavan is everybody in Vrindavan believes that Krishna and especially Radharani belong together, that's natural and perfect. Even the mothers-in-law of Radharani, even the husband of Radharani, they believe like that. And so in a similar way that when Krishna was stealing butter from all of the residents of Vrindavan and they were complaining, so he comes and does so many things in our household, and they come and complain to Mother Yashoda. She says, "Okay, I'll stop him from doing that." She says, "No, don't stop him," because they appreciate Krishna. He's so wonderful. So even when Mother Jatila is trying to protect her daughter-in-law from Krishna, she does it out of a sense of duty because she does it because she knows that Krishna is such a danger. He's so wonderful. She appreciates his wonderful nature. So it's a totally different circumstance. Though everyone is connected in some way with this wonderful relationship of love between Krishna and everyone. So it's quite a different situation.
But isn't it also the relationship is without lust, and so that's really
That's also the case. Yeah, another explanation has been given actually by Shukadev Goswami in the Bhagavatam. He says that Krishna, all of his pastimes, all of his activities are based on the level of full self-satisfaction, and so therefore it's love and not lust. Yeah, so that explanation is also given. Yeah, exactly. and it doesn't harm anybody. Actually, even the other, even like the Jatila and Kutila and stuff are feeling happiness because if there's a connection with Krishna. The people in the households where Krishna is causing so many trouble, stealing their butter, picking on their children, they're experiencing happiness by that, even when he's naughty, just because he's so wonderful. They get a chance to, and they don't so don't stop that.
What is reproach mean? Without reproach?
It means you can't criticize it. You can't criticize it. Nobody criticized. So that's this word avrana means without any kind of criticism or that sort of thing. Okay. So let's carry on. And so it says, acting in ways that are beyond reproach follows from being pure and sinless, as well as from the benevolence evident from the following characteristic mentioned in this mantra. So someone who's, like I said, without lust, pure and sinless, and they have a great nature. They're not going to do anything that's inappropriate. They're only going to do wonderful things. So let's look at this one. Yatatat tortan vedadach fulfills everyone's desires. The Prabhupada says, in this mantra, as well as in many other Vedic mantras, it is clearly stated that the Lord has been supplying goods to the living entities from time immemorial. A living being desires something, and the Lord supplies the object of that desire in proportion to one's qualification. But good qualifications in themselves are not sufficient to enable one to receive awards. The mercy of the Lord is also required. So by looking at this, you might think a couple of things. First of all, you might think that if he is fulfilling all of our desires, why are their desires left unmet since he is unlimited? We might wonder about that. I have desires, and he doesn't seem to be meeting all of them. And so Prabhupada explains that by the qualifications. He says, the previous quote shows why all of our desires are not fulfilled and counters the karma mimamsa philosophy, which considers the laws of karma to be superior to the Lord. And that's what he was talking about when he says, good qualifications in themselves are not sufficient to enable one to receive awards. The mercy of the Lord is also required. There's one of the Vedic darshans, is the karma mimamsa philosophy and Krishna actually speaks that during the Govardhan Leela. The cowherd men are gonna worship Indra for rain because they're farmers and cowherd men. And Krishna says, look, what's Indra got to do with it? He rains on the ocean, he rains on the rocks. He doesn't care where he rains. So if you just perform your duties properly, the rain will automatically come. So it's like a notion of the law of karma being superior to any personality, including God or the devatas. You don't have to worry about that. That if we perform sacrifices, homas and things like that, the devatas have to do what you want. They have no choice in the matter. So it's like you're in charge. So Prabhupada's mentioning that that's also not true. It needs Krishna's sanction. It tends to work that way, but he has to sanction it. It doesn't have to. Okay. So here Prabhupada says, thus, this is in this purpose, thus this mantra of Sri Isopanishad uses the very appropriate word, yata tatyataha, indicating that the Lord rewards the living entities just in pursuance of their desires. If a living being wants to go to hell, the Lord allows him to do so without interference. And if he wants to go back home, back to Godhead, the Lord helps him. We should especially remember that last sentence. The Lord helps him. And we noticed previously, and also here in this last quote, that the souls have freedom. That's part of their ekatma, their oneness with the Lord. They're a special entity that even though the Lord is the supreme controller, right, controls everything. When we discuss how he can control everything very easily, he gives us freedom. And that's why we heard previously that the life of the human being is one of responsibility. We can choose wrong or we can choose rightly. And because I said, the Lord, of course, doesn't desire anyone to go to hell. And you can see that by, it says, the Sri Upanishad itself is one way he tries to direct us into the best path. He gives us freedom, but he wants to help us. He gives us the Isopanishad. He does so many ways to try to say, hey, don't do that. That's not very good. But he does. And this is also a notion of his, that we have an interaction with him already. See, this is the interesting thing. Sometimes we think we're going to try to find God, and God's far distant from us. But not only is he close, we said here, he's there in every body with us, but he's already interacting with us. He's responding to our desires already. We're just not so attentive to him. This is something interesting. Not only is there a potential for a relationship, but the relationship is already in existence today. We just don't want the right things. That's been our problem so far. So here's in this slide says the first mantra taught us that there is a controller and owner of everything, and that we have a certain role to play in this world. We know now that we are souls that share the same spiritual nature as the Lord, Ekatvam, and that we are being given the opportunity to come in contact with that supreme controller and owner. So in the first verse, there wasn't a whole, the relationship was pretty formal and not very closely connected. The Lord owns everything. He controls everything. We have a place in the world, and it's our job to follow that place. And that's the beginning of wisdom. We shouldn't trespass, cross any of the boundaries. Here, as we've gone along, we find out there's a much closer connection, a personal connection. There's already an interaction. That we are not just beings in this world, but we are spiritual entities, in some way similar to the Lord. We now know of his unique power and wonderful character. We knew, we talk about, having the Lord be our shelter, surrendering to the Lord. Right? We're used to in our lives, we sometimes approach people more powerful than us when we have a specific need. Sometimes that power may be, somebody who repairs our appliances, like we have going out down the outside repairing our washers. Sometimes it means, somebody who's our superior at our job, or some influential person. Sometimes it means when you call up the customer service line that you have to talk to a supervisor instead of the person there, because they can do things that can't be done by the frontline person. So we're used to, we're thinking we can pretty much succeed on our own, and then for certain cases we go to certain people who might be able to help us with those particular things. When we deal with the Lord, who has control of everything and is everything, we can feel confident that he can do that we have perfect shelter with him. That there's no need to take shelter of anyone else. There is no other shelter, actually. So we can feel confident that simply by pleasing him, everything is done. That's the basis of pure faith. That's all we got to do. And now we know he has wonderful character also. He's pure, and purify us, and he himself, his conduct is without reproach. He's a wonderful person, which should make us feel free of our doubts that if someone is so powerful, what kind of person are they? Maybe they'll be a cosmic tyrant. We know that he is already interacting with us, and that he is willing to help us to come closer to him. So I think if we take into account all those different things, our confidence in the path of bhakti should be increasing. All these things should help to be a foundation for our we talked about confidence, Nishchad, in the Nectar of Instruction. So we're understanding things here in the Nectar of Instruction that should help our faith, our confidence in the path of bhakti to be increasing. We understand these various things. So here it says, Prabhupada says, just as a final quote for this mantra, Prabhupada says in the purport, ordinarily the living being does not know what to ask from the Lord, nor which post to seek. When the living being comes to know his constitutional position, however, he asks to be accepted into the transcendental association of the Lord in order to render transcendental loving service unto him, Unfortunately, living beings under the influence of material nature ask for many other things, and they are described in the Bhagavad Gita 241 as having divided or splayed intelligence. We don't have it says there that the vyavasa atmaka buddhi, a fixed intelligence, that we understand what is important, and it's singular. And says otherwise it's bahushaka, many branches. We think many things are very important. So we're going to actually revisit that quote later on at the end in mantra 11. Okay. Okay, so that's mantra 8. Um, it reinforces some of the things we've known before. I think it gives us an insight into our relationship and his wonderful qualities that we hadn't seen before, and all those things should help us to increase our faith. So here we're going to talk about here of 2 kinds of ignorance in mantra number 9. Let me see, where are we at time-wise? Whoa, we are really okay. So that first mantra really takes a lot out of us. So we're going to have to move kind of quickly. For the other ones. So here it says, Andam tama pravishanti te vidyam upasate tatobuya iva te tamoya uvidyayam rataha. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. Now, in the actual verse, it just says vidyayam, in the culture of knowledge. That's how Prabhupada translates it. He gives a little bit of a purportful translation when he says so-called, because that's the implication here. And you'll see some of the verses in here are kind of they have these contrasts that they do kind of for effect. Here it says, so literally it just says, those who engage in the culture of nescient activity shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance, and worse are those engaged in the culture of knowledge. That's what it says bluntly. So Prabhupada is going to explain what that really means. And but it's supposed to be a very attention-grabbing sort of thing, and make you think about what you think your knowledge is. That's what it's supposed to shake your foundations. So Prabhupada says so-called knowledge. And he explains in the purport, he says, avidya, or ignorance, is undoubtedly dangerous, but vidya, or knowledge, is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. Okay? This mantra of Sri Isopanishad is more applicable today than at any time in the past. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education, but the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement, to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So he's giving one example um, he explains further here also. He says, as far as Vidya is concerned, the first mantra has explained very clearly that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything, and that forgetfulness of this fact is ignorance. The more a man forgets this fact of life, the more he is in darkness. In view of this, a godless civilization directed toward the so-called advancement of education is more dangerous than a civilization in which the masses of people are less educated, he puts in quotation marks. Um, and then so it's an explanation for this is pretty simple. It's much more difficult to help someone who has a philosophical basis for acting ignorantly. They're already convinced that they're right. So if you have somebody who just doesn't know what's right, they're just ignorant. You can educate them in the right way. But someone who has a core belief, like here in the he's talking here particularly about kind of the modern educational system and the modern worldview. And in many places, especially in the Western countries, spiritual knowledge is considered to be an anachronism. It just simply it was a mistake. Primitive people were trying to understand, or sometimes they say elite persons were trying to create superstitions so they could keep people under control. These kinds of things. And now that we have advanced science and technology, we've surpassed all of that. All these things should just be they're for primitive, less intelligent people, and should just be swept aside. If you're in a Western university environment, that's the modern paradigm. That before we had superstition, speculation, maybe even fabrication, and now we have knowledge that's based upon evidence and ability to confirm it. Otherwise, these are belief systems or something like that. There's no way to confirm them, and really they should be swept aside. That's a very strong current in the modern world, and that's what you get in the modern secular educational system, really. Um, I've noticed that we have so many members of our congregations in ISKCON temples that are from India. Many times they're doctors, engineers, have a scientific background. It doesn't seem to bother them. It doesn't seem to take. But in the West, it's really powerful. It's really powerful. You still find religious scientists and things even amongst Westerners, but it's less. You go to religion departments in universities, and nobody, practically nobody believes in religion. It's just a study.
Even in India now it is spreading.
Yeah, it's going to happen more. It's going to because it's a little bit behind the times, but you're catching up with the modern paradigm. Yeah. It's with the so-called, it's probably a so-called advancement. You're going to become advanced like us at the same time. Yeah.
Is there anything that you say to somebody that has that belief? Like any, I know every person you interact with those beliefs would have a different conversation with, but like some basis that just shoots down that sort of.
We're actually going to come to something in the next verse that will answer that question the best that I can do it. Mm-hmm. So Prabhupada is saying that so when you talk to people like that, you tell them God is, come on, So they're in a worse position than somebody who says who's just ignorant. Because of uneducated. So we say sometimes a little knowledge is dangerous. So that way a wrong knowledge makes it worse. So that's the point here in this verse. And then the Prabhupada gives a couple other examples that are based on the Vedas. This type of misunderstanding is just based on worldly knowledge, but also said within the Vedic tradition there's misunderstandings that are harmful. And so he quotes the verses from Bhagavad Gita 2:42 and 43. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. And Krishna is criticizing them in this case. They call them Vedavada Ratahas. The Vedas, we don't have time to get into why the Vedas do this, but they give you reward for acting properly. That's what they do. And it allows people not to commit sinful activities that will send them down into the darkest regions of ignorance. But then some people think that's all that's meant to be done there. That's the highest level of spirituality, is that you acquire sukriti and enjoy a better life, next birth and birth after that, and that kind of thing. But that that just that we have a whole different conception, and Krishna does too. That we have an eternal relationship with Him. We get out of the cycle of birth and death. We have an eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord, which is this is what's being talked about here in Isopanishad, and it's just simply much, much better. So he said, people who say that this is all you get, actually it hurts them and hurts others. Then he says the other kind. He says the Mayaya Paritagyana class of men are self-made gods. Such men think that they themselves are God and that there is no need of worshiping any other God. Such men say that God is all-powerful, but they do not consider that if He is all-powerful, there is no possibility of His being overpowered by Maya. These self-made gods cannot answer all these questions very clearly. They are simply satisfied to have become gods themselves. This is talking about the Mayavad philosophy. This actually is the definition of it. The people who understand that we understand everything is Krishna, but they think it's homogeneous. Homogeneous. So like we saw before last time, we had the little picture of the ink dropping into the beaker, and the ink dissolves, and so everything is homogeneous. It's all the supreme. There's one unified supreme. Shankaracharya has a specific take on that, but most people just think like that. There's just one Brahman, and we kind of merge with that, and it's over with. So we are God. Everything is God. in the sense that God is. So we understand that we have a certain quality, one in quality, as Prabhupada says, but that God is unique, and we've been hearing about his unique properties all along. And so what you have with the Mayavad philosophy is an unbalanced understanding. They understand the unity, but they don't understand the diversity. And what they have a certain correct intuition that everything is connected. There is a certain oneness to everything. It's all Krishna and Krishna's energy. That's a fact. But they take it too far. And so instead of taking up devotion, or they take up devotion to the point where then they can merge. So you can take any type of path you like, but at the end, then you give it up and you merge into the absolute. So if you can worship Krishna up until the point where you're liberated, then you have to give that notion up and realize actually you're God. So there's a strong. We don't have time to talk about Shankaracharya either. He had a specific mission and reason for doing that. But
So, one question here actually on the self-made gods. So, there is a lot of gurus actually not like following the ISKCON. Are we consider them because they are propagating some their philosophy? They are changing they are introducing their own thoughts and all. Like there is many followers, other followers. So
and
we
any kind of distorted Vedic knowledge,
Vedic knowledge
any
is
kind of distorted
considered.
knowledge, period, is here's being said here is unhelpful, actually harmful, and
Mhm.
worse than ignorance. So people have different There's instead there's also in the Vedas there's different sections.
Mhm.
Okay, now if people are recommended to do pious activities because it will take them to the heavenly planets, that's okay. Because the hope is that's supposed to lead them to higher understanding. It's just when you couple that with the notion that there's nothing else to ever be attained. You see, that's what makes it harmful knowledge. The whole Vedic path has different levels of understanding that lead you upwards. And as soon as you say this is all there is to know, before it gets to the final conclusion, that becomes harmful. So this the same way there may be people also who worship who are attracted. We had the Kumaras who were attracted to Brahman. They were attracted to the oneness. They didn't claim to be God, and they didn't claim that there was no personal form of God, but they were just attracted to that. That was not harmful for them. Actually. So it's when you say this is the ultimate until it actually reaches the ultimate, then it becomes a
So
problem.
even though like if somebody change their thought in our like let's say they are following the Krishna consciousness ISKCON movement and if they change their behavior thought like they are pretending promoting as a self god like their own philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that considered to be self god or self-made god or?
Well, if they claim to be God, that's what you can say. There obviously is only one God, from what we've understood about from the Isopanishad. And so we say we're a katman, we have a connection. We're dear to God. We have some of the same characteristics. Probably it's like a sample, like a drop in the ocean. But He has a specific situation. So if we claim to be God, that clearly is not very. Doesn't have a basis, and it's not. And if it doesn't have a basis, it's not very helpful. We're connected. We have oneness in quality.
Can any Mayavadi be can become transcendental? Like I'm seeing like big
Yeah, that's a
gurus
good question.
are starting organizations.
It depends on their understanding. So there's Brahmavadis and Mayavadis, and so when people claim that the personal form of God is material, that hurts them very badly because they're making an offense against the Lord. If someone is just attracted to Brahman, attracted to oneness, without making offense, they can be liberated into Brahman.
Yeah, I'm not
But
talking Brahmavadi.
but
I'm
it
only talking.
is if as soon as you say the form of the Lord is Shankaracharya actually says it's illusion. That this world is illusion. There's more different kind of varieties of these kind of folks these days. But in the classic way, he said that there only exists Brahman. And so this world, us, we don't exist. God doesn't exist. It's illusion. He says you cannot properly say that it exists or properly say that it does not. That's how he puts it. You know.
But he also said that Govinda Mayin, he said.
Well, that's a different thing. That was his kind of secret teaching later on, but his main philosophy, because he had a certain purpose. We don't really have time to. We have to talk about this
But
later.
my point is like
On Wednesday.
anybody who says that.
Huh?
On Wednesday.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, to be more straightforward, anybody who says that one can merge on to Brahman or there is no God as a person, that is still okay. But God can be captured by Maya.
Well,
So can any of these
just
become-
that the personal form of the Lord is illusory or material. These things are
And he
the
will say
problem.
that there is no God is not a person. That is one thing strongly say.
Yeah,
And that God is illusionized by Maya
yeah.
and
Otherwise,
merging onto Brahman.
otherwise they say they may be personal forms, but they're just part of Maya. We'll say. So anyway, we have to move on from this. We can't. This is
Yeah, Wednesday.
beyond our scope here.
Who
A
was
little
it
bit here
that was
today.
saying that anyway?
And so okay, so mantra 10. Anyad evahar vidyaya nyadahar avidyaya iti shushrumadhiranam yenastad vichakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. We've already heard, earlier on how the culture of nescience brings you down into the darkness of ignorance and to the lower planetary systems and such things. And so here is so the main thrust of this Prabhupada's purport here is that spiritual knowledge, because he talks about it, says it's cultivation of knowledge and cultivation of ignorance, right? So spiritual knowledge is cultivated, and this is something that was going to come and answer your question, Punam, as we go along. And Prabhupada quotes first in his purport. He quotes this list of items from Bhagavad Gita in the 16th chapter, I think. 13th chapter, maybe it is. I can't remember now. But there's things that constitute knowledge. And Prabhupada says these 18 items combine to form a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. So sometimes we think that knowledge just means information acquisition. And there's more than that. It's a cultivation. And there's a gradual process by which real knowledge can be developed. And and also in the purport, he says the living entity has actual functions in the living spiritual world, but this material world is dead. As long as the living spiritual sparks manipulate the dead lumps of matter, the dead world appears to be a living world. Actually, it is the living souls, the parts and parcels of the supreme living being, who move the world. And then emphasizing it says the Dhiras have come to know all these facts by hearing them from superior authorities and have realized this knowledge by following the regulative principles. So this is where I would come from, especially when you're dealing with scientific people who tell you that you cannot confirm. You see that it's only a belief system. That we can actually we actually have a process for knowledge. It's not just a belief system or hearing, but we have a practice which will gradually confirm the theories up to the point of seeing God face to face. But even earlier on, we'll see certain transformations that happen to us. We are being transferred to the mode of goodness. Many different new qualities will arise in us. We'll become Dhira. So we have a theory. And we have a well understood path by how bhakti develops and certain characteristics that happen such and such and such and such and such a time. We can take up that practice and we can confirm that for ourselves all the way up to the point of seeing God face to face. So also ours is an empirical process. We just use our own selves as a laboratory.
Such an important point.
And then also spiritual knowledge is cultivated. It's not merely a matter of belief. It's not just information or just a belief. And here Prabhupada says, this mantra states that the instructions of vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from a dhira. A dhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. Adira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. So then next we say that spiritual knowledge is called, it's learned from realized practitioners who are faithful to the tradition. We don't do it alone. There's a received tradition. There's been people who've been doing this. This says in Bhagavad Gita, right, that people have been doing this thing since time immemorial. So many people have gone back to Godhead. And we have this whole community of practitioners. Like we have our tradition. So we have many different types of people in many different circumstances who have practiced bhakti. And so we have like this whole collected wisdom. We have all of our acharyas. We have Prabhupada works, we have all of our other acharyas. We have our other devotees who have unique experiences. And so Prabhupada says to follow the regulative principles, one must take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. The transcendental message and regulative principles come down from the spiritual master to the disciple. Such knowledge does not come in the hazardous way of nescient education. One can become a dhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. And we have various kinds of spiritual masters that we probably don't emphasize enough. We have our initiated one, but we also have shiksha gurus. So it's our whole community. But we have to have it has to be received. Correct. That's received because people already know how it's done. We always think in the modern world we have this notion of new is better. Right now, I think like we used to say when I was young, people would advertise new products as new and improved, and now they just say new. Improved is just presumed. Right? You don't have to say new and improved anymore. I have to just say new, and of course it's better because everything just gets better. So we think also if we can make a new spiritual process, why not? Everything that's new is better. But actually, the process is very well understood, and it's been understood through many, many, many generations. So we should find out from people who know how to do it, and especially from people who have some level of realization. The higher, the better. You know. Then we know how. We can understand processes as like a science, an applied science. We can look at it and see what's holding us back, what can make us move forward, and people who have experience can help us with these kinds of things. So it's cultivated, but so there's a certain process, and we can be helped by those who already have some experience.
So from here, Dhira we can compare with the Madhyamadikari and other parts. Can we compare that?
At least Madhyam,
Exactly,
at least Madhyam, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, they becomes more and more Dhyam as you advance further. Yeah. Okay, so the final one, because we're running out of time rapidly, to mantra 11. We're calling this freedom from birth and death, and it's vidyam cha yas tad vedo bhayam saha avidyayam ritum tirtva vidyayam ritum ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So we just heard, right, that cultivating knowledge and cultivating nescience leads to two separate things, and so there's a real imperative for us to cultivate vidya, knowledge. But here it's saying that you also need to know about avidya. And so that also kind of raises a little question. I wonder why. And so we'll talk about that. Okay. So anyway, here's the problem. Prabhupada states in the purport, since the creation of the material world, everyone has been trying to attain a permanent life. But the laws of nature are so cruel that no one has been able to avoid the hand of death. No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The law of nature, however, does not allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death. Okay. It's from the purport. And then also he says, the process by which one goes back to Godhead, this is the solution to that problem, is a different branch of knowledge. It has to be learned from revealed Vedic scriptures such as the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam to become happy in this life and attain a permanent blissful life. After leaving this material body, one must study the sacred literature and obtain transcendental knowledge. So again, confirming that we need to cultivate knowledge, right? We need to have. Here it says we have to have both. So this is why we have to have the knowledge part. Now the question arises, okay, that's clear. If the solution is if the problem, is rebirth, the solution is vidya, what's the purpose of knowing a vidya? Prabhupada gives a couple of answers, actually. And we'll mention two. One, we're going to focus on one, and we'll mention the other one also. And here Prabhupada says, birth and death apply to the outward covering of the spirit, soul, the body. Death is compared to the taking off, and birth to the putting on of outward garments. Foolish human beings who are grossly absorbed in the culture of avidya, nescients, do not mind this cruel process. Enamored with the beauty of illusory energy, they undergo the same miseries repeatedly and do not learn any lessons from the laws of nature. So this is the danger of the culture of avidya. Right? So nobody wants to die. We're dying, but people are continuing to act in ways that are going to make them continue to die. They don't mind it. Okay, so again, we're still left with the question. Okay, why avidya? This is the danger of avidya. Now, Prabhupada says here, I said the desire for material happiness is very deeply rooted, and we will be inclined to think that we can cultivate vidya while still enjoying material life. And Prabhupada here says this thing. He says, I think we will be made uncomfortable when we hear what Prabhupada says here in the verse, in the purport. He says, sense enjoyment in the diseased material condition must be restricted as far as possible. Unrestricted sense enjoyment in this bodily condition is the path of ignorance and death. Devotees will often ask, can't you do both? Why can't we enjoy a nice life and also cultivate knowledge? Okay? And when we hear something like that, we think, ooh, that sounds rough. That it has to be restricted as far as possible. Okay? So we're getting closer to the answer now. The question is still there. But this is part we're getting closer. And so I say here, our attachment for material enjoyment prevents us from making vidya our steady top priority. And Prabhupada says in the purport, ordinarily the living being does not know what to ask from the Lord. We've heard this before, so we're coming back to it. Nor which post to seek. This comes from the mantra 8. When the living being comes to know his constitutional position, however, he asks to be accepted into the transcendental association of the Lord in order to render transcendental loving service unto him. Unfortunately, living beings under the influence of material nature ask for many other things, and they are described in the Bhagavad Gita as having divided or splayed intelligence. So let's take a look here. Here it says, in the Nectar of Instruction, we talked about how unsteady bhakti can progress to the steady stage. Right? In the unsteady stage, the attraction for the spiritual competes with the attraction for the material. So we have made a commitment to become Krishna conscious, but very few of us do not still have attractions for the pleasures of the senses. You see? And that attraction makes us be part way to what we saw before. So that we said the people who are really attracted to those things, right, they don't care about the process of birth and death. They become very complacent. So we're left with this kind of unpleasant situation. We have a real attraction for Krishna, but we still have attraction for the other things, and they are mutually contradictory. You cannot, and we'll discuss this a lot more carefully in Bhagavad Gita, how that changes the way we see things, how it changes the way we understand things. It makes profound changes it makes us forget ourselves as a spiritual entity, and rather than help us to understand it. It makes profound changes. So progress towards steadiness means that we must both increase the attachment for the spiritual and decrease the attachment for the material. We have this Actually, we understand from Srimad Bhagavatam actually that we have this long-standing optimism about material life. And it's hard to get rid of it. Really hard. It runs so deep. It's called karmashayan. Deep desire for material happiness. It's really deep. And so if we understand these 2 points, right, both with the result of the understand that both the futility of material life and the benefits of spiritual life, then we can act on both sides of the equation. And when we keep both of those, and we'll see that Prabhupada does that all the time in his preaching. Let's first of all take one more step here. In the purport, Prabhupada says, the miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of vidya, or transcendental knowledge. So if we understand the dangers of avidya, instead of being like the folks who it says they don't want to die, but they can't do anything about it, they're too caught up in material enjoyment to so they just deal with it. They just tolerate it. They don't care for it. We, when faced with difficulties, will remember. And then the final thing is you'll notice that Srila Prabhupada does this all the time. There's there's kind of these 2 kind of categories of the way he preaches. Right? He emphasizes both sides of the coin. You hear him say a whole lot. You hear the threefold miseries, the fourfold miseries, and the cycle of birth and death. You'll hear this again and again and again and again. And then he'll of course also talk about how wonderful devotional service is. How how the love of Godhead is the result. All these wonderful. You'll hear how everything is Krishna's energy and can be used in the service. Right? So you see, he uses both of these approaches. He teaches us avidya and vidya at the same time. Yeah, see, he understands it. He makes us understand it so that we dampen our enthusiasm for the material world while increasing our attachment to spiritual life. Otherwise, we're just telling us how wonderful spiritual life is without letting us focus on the miseries of material existence, leave us in that midway position where we want Krishna, but those other attachments are still strong. Being conscious of both things at once, as it says here, it says side by side, helps to break that kind of balance. we don't want that balance where we're attracted to both in the same. We want to move it towards Krishna. So we have to lose our optimism about this material world. Otherwise, it holds us back. Guaranteed. So that's why we have to understand. We don't cultivate avidya. We cultivate knowledge. We understand the knowledge and we understand avidya both, and what the results are. Then the Prabhupada also gives a little different take. At the end, he says, this does not mean that all activities for maintenance of the body should be stopped, because we're trying to transcend. But there's a process for that, as he mentioned. There is no question of stopping activities, just as there is no question of wiping out one's temperature altogether when trying to recover from a disease. He says, to make the best use of a bad bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of the body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. Prabhupada used, all types of, he used the technology of the day to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. He says, a certain amount of just regular material knowledge is, can be used in Krishna service. He was kind of cutting edge in the early days. I think it was Gargamuni that got him a dictaphone. He had an old manual typewriter that was stolen when he was translating his books and was typing them out. And Gargamuni got him a dictaphone where you could just press the button and talk, press the button and talk. And so he said, you can use these such things in Krishna's service. He used. He came over on a steamship, but afterwards, when he could afford it, he traveled by airplane all around, and you used printing presses and these things. So a certain amount of material expertise is useful in service and useful for our maintenance, and that's That's not a problem. It's just when it becomes out of balance. And it's used only for our pleasures. So that's the end of the presentation for today. We'll pick up with two more sessions. I think it's 12, 13, and 14, if I'm not mistaken, next time. Let's see. So we started a little bit late and we ended right on time. So I guess we have a little bit of time if we want for further discussion, if you like. Any we do a pretty good job of doing questions in the middle, I guess. But is there any more questions or comments?
The last summary, spiritual versus the material, would it be appropriate to say, if we understand the material world, avidya, then we'll be better equipped to redirect to our goals. And that is the spiritual goal.
Yeah, because otherwise we are attracted.
Right.
We're attracted.
Right.
And even though it's madness, we're attracted.
Right.
And we have to keep reminding ourselves that it's not good, it's not fun, it's not wonderful. Because we default back to that condition. Actually, in the Bhagavatam, it mentions this that when we first acquire the physical and subtle body, that we're enthusiastic about it. We think, man, we can do so much with this. This is going to be good. This is a nice new toy we've got, and what's going to work for us. So many universes, so many places to go, so many things to do. And we get so caught up in it that it says that we reach the stage of abhaveshanata, or absorption. We're only experiencing that. It's not a toy anymore. And that abhaveshanata leads to identification. Now it's me. So I mean, you get somebody who's playing some kind of online video game. They almost get to that point. Wow, cool! And then you want to play it all the time, and then you almost forget that you're there. Well, it happens with us because it's an immersive, three-dimensional, persistent game that we have here, and so it's so much into us. It's so deeply rooted that even though we know better and we've heard better, we need to keep hearing it. Because we just default to that condition. We want to be Krishna's devotees, but a little of this isn't going to hurt, a little of that's not going to hurt. We need to have a little something. It's really hard. It's so deeply ingrained in us. And that's part of what keeps our devotion unsteady. And so that's why Prabhupada keeps hammering that home. You keep hearing it throughout his purports. The threefold miseries, the fourfold miseries, and the cycle of birth and death. And it's not enough to have him tell us that 10 times or 20 times or 200 times, again and again and again. He always emphasized that. Because we really have to lose that enthusiasm for the material world. That really it's a dead end. It's not even good even in the present. The result of it isn't very good, but even now we're miserable. It just increases the desires. It keeps us unhappy. The only way you can develop, happiness is through two things. There's internal happiness that the soul has, and there's the happiness of being in association of Krishna, super happiness. We call that the higher taste. The more that we are drawn, our attention is drawn out into the senses and the mind in a non-service mood, that's taking us away from our contact with Krishna and making us forget ourself as a soul. Only one result can happen, and it happens to us all the time. We're still unhappy. Momentary happiness, and then more desire.
So at the system level, back to what you said, the modern education, so-called advancement, at the exclusion of the spiritual knowledge,
Yeah.
has created all these things. That there is so much so-called advancement, but there is an exclusion of God in that. This material thing is the ultimate goal.
And both in the Nectar of Instruction and here in the Isopanishad, Prabhupada makes a lot of social commentary. We haven't talked about that a whole lot in class because we're kind of constrained for time, but he talks about how all of these desires, we're trying to produce more and more, so it's taking so much effort, so much work, so much of our time, and it causes us to be in conflict with one another. He said here in one of the purports, that 50% of our wealth is being used in defense forces, and we're trying to acquire things and defend what we have, and it causes this hypertrophy of trying to produce and to create. Yeah, I had a professor in university who he had this interesting theory that will never happen because of this. Is he thought that because we are so much more productive with our modern industrial types of production and things like that, now with different kinds of software and things, that we could reduce the work week for everybody, that we could produce everything we need with a fraction of our time, and so that we would the result should be so much more leisure time. But there's never enough, is there? Where do you cap it off? This is enough now. You can never cap it. We always want more. And we of course want profits and more stuff. So it never happens. Nobody will ever come to that conclusion that now we can fulfill all of our needs with minimal labor. So now we don't have to work so hard. That will never come about. That's a logical thing, but it's not a practical thing. And so and now we and of course, and even now we think that and Prabhupada always thought it was an unsustainable system. And we even think now, like when now the Chinese economy has shrunk a bit, but when it was really expanding, people were wondering where are all the natural resources going to come from? How can all these different countries be manufacturing and doing stuff? We're going to run out of resources. This rare mineral and that other mineral, where is it going to come from? And so how far can we expand it? There's even and of course all the environmental effects and things like that are even cause doubt amongst people who aren't spiritual. So Prabhupada thought it was unsustainable. That this kind of a thing also causes all kinds of social, environmental, and economic problems.
Interesting language.
Yeah.
Uses, you repeated it a few times. You said people don't mind staying.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't
That
mind.
was really striking language.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, and that's really how it is. It's okay. This is how it is. It's just how it is. Because it's supposed to be. That's what's supposed to make us want to figure out what's going on. The miseries of life. We go, this isn't good. Is there some way to fix it? And now is the time to inquire, Prabhupada says. But for the most part, people just say, no, that's how it is. Don't worry. It's how life has always been, always will be. It's okay. I'm good. Or he also talks about when people are in the hospital, you say, how are you, right? Oh, I'm doing fine. He makes that joke also.